All right, we are live. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, man. How's stuff going over there?
Pretty good. We're working on lining up the first big batch of new feature work for Basecamp 3. Uh, we been building new stuff, but it's been like improvements to tightening up some stuff, plugging some holes, and fixing some things, and building a couple new things. But January 4th is when we begin our like real cycles of doing new feature work and big stuff. So kind of lining up that stuff and finishing up a few pitches around that, and posting them to Basecamp for review, and we'll see what happens.
Cool.
Plan. Yeah, fun, good stuff.
What do you sit down and worry about vision much? Do you worry about like a year's worth of plans in the future, or yeah, like how far do you try to kind of plan some of your feature thinking, I guess?
Not a full year, but what we typically will do a few months out. But one of the things I want to do this year is I want to there's a couple big picture goals that I'd like to tackle this upcoming year. And one of those is one of the weaker points of Basecamp, something I think Basecamp needs to be better at, is a visual overview of the work remaining and the work outstanding and who's working on what. It's all very possible to get at this stuff, but it's not as clear as it's certainly not as clear as it could be or as glanceable as it could be. And so I don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but I know it's a big picture goal. And so I want to set that out as something like for the company, so we know like this is actually one of the biggest changes that we can be making to Basecamp this year is that sort of stuff. I don't know when we're going to get to it and what it's going to look like yet. So it's not a proposal. It's like this is an area of interest that we should be focused on this year. And there'll be other ones that pop up, but that's definitely one I think that we need to be focused on a bit more. So so I'll kind of talk that through, but won't game plan it. I don't know what it's going to look like yet.
Yeah.
People's minds.
Yeah. Interesting.
Plant a couple seeds and see where that goes. And then there'll be more tactical work before that. And then maybe a few months from now, we'll have some good ideas on what to do with that other idea and see where it goes.
Cool. Did you want to tackle the topic? You had brought up, stuff that should get revisited or stuff that, should get revisited kind of while you're doing it. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I do. So one of the things that we were thinking about is, so we built this, when we built Basecamp 3, we had this idea of we're calling adoptional, which is an important idea. And it's a relatively unusual idea for our set of tools, our kind of in our industry, which is that a lot of tools require everybody to buy in. Everyone's got to adopt these things in order for them to be useful. And I think that's just kind of it's a very unattainable goal for a lot of people. It's a nice idea if it comes through, and that's wonderful, and like, that's great. But I've talked to so many people over the years about this kind of stuff, and people struggle with this. They just flat out struggle with it. They flat out struggle with adoption. It doesn't matter whose product it is. It's just like I hear from people all the time who've tried all of our competitors' products and have tried ours and left ours because they couldn't get people to use it, and came to us because they couldn't get people to use other ones, but they used ours. Like it's a fundamental, difficult thing to pull people along with you into a tool. It's just fun. So we focused pretty heavily on this idea of adoptional, which is that with Basecamp, you don't have to convince anybody to use it with you. People who don't want to flat out quote use it with you, meaning they don't want to log in, they don't want to sign in, they don't want to set up an account, they don't want to use the app. They just get emails, and everybody knows how to use email, and everyone knows how to respond to an email. They don't have to sign in or agree to anything. They just get stuff occasionally, and they can reply to it, and it's in Basecamp, and everyone else can use it, and the whole thing. So like you basically have the inner circles and outer circles of people. You've got the dedicated people who are working on something really closely, and then you've got people on the fringes. If you think about it like an atom, you've got a nucleus of a team that's bought into something, and then you've got these electrons floating around the outside who just need to sort of receive stuff occasionally and do not need to be bothered by anything else. All right, so this is a reality of people, and So one of the things we did with the new Basecamp was create this thing. We didn't create it, but we went down this path of making it what we're calling passwordless, which basically means no one needs to set up an account necessarily. They kind of do set up an account, but they don't set up in the traditional way, in that they don't create a username, they don't create a password, they don't log in. All they have to do is verify their email address and they're in, basically, once. So that was the big idea, all right? But it was pinned on a few different things that had to work well to make that idea work. And as we were building this feature, it turned out that we compromised in a few spots on some of these key principles that were required to make the experience what we thought it could possibly be. One of those things was originally we were going to have this idea of what we're calling a magic link. So the first time you're now notified about anything in Basecamp, you just click a link in this email that you'd get, because you hadn't bought into the product yet, so you were just getting an email. And you click the email, and then you'd be like cookied, and you'd be logged in automatically, and then you'd just be permanently logged in until you logged out. What was interesting about that is that we sort of ran in ultimately to some potential security issues with it around. Not the fact that people's email addresses can be owned, because if that's the case, you're screwed anyway. But It's more about, again, getting back to what people do in the real world, which is people forward emails around. And so if you get an email from somebody from Basecamp and you happen to forward it to somebody else because you're like, what is this? Or check this out. If you click the link, then they'd become you. And that is unacceptable from a security standpoint. So then we had to do, so like the magic link idea wouldn't work. So we had to do this other thing where you'd get in, and then you have to, like, you'd get in, you get a link, you'd get in, you'd hit a page and say, enter your email. Then you have to go back to your inbox and verify it once, then you're in. It's like this extra hop. And just that one extra hop was enough to make this a pain in the ass. But we didn't reevaluate the overall concept at that point. We just kept pushing through and be like, okay, so you got to do that now. Security issue. Let's take care of the security issue and like keep going. And we ended up launching something that has confused enough people. I mean, there's tens and tens and tens of thousands of people who are successfully using Basecamp every day.
Yeah.
But enough people, like a significant number, more than we've ever had, have been having login issues and sign-in issues. Significantly more than we had in the previous version of Basecamp. And so, like, it just points that there's something we're doing that's complicated. It's ultimately simpler in some ways, but it's uncomfortable for people because it's weird and unusual and they're not used to it. And there's some other issues, like someone goes on their phone and they send in the phone app and they have to verify, and they verify the email on their desktop, but the desktop can't launch the phone app. So it's like, there's some weirdness. There's just weirdness. Anyway, the lesson, so we had this postmortem about it, like, wow, we kind of sort of messed that up a little bit. What do we do? So we have a solution. But aside from the solution, the real lesson was that along the way, if your idea is resting on a few core principles or a few core things that have to be in place in order for the experience to be good, and you begin to compromise on one or two of those things, you've got to stop and question if the whole idea is valid anymore. Because when you just keep pushing through, you end up doing a lot of work and then finding out the things that needed to be right. If you compromise on those, then the whole idea just kind of starts to fall apart at some level. And we didn't do that as we built this. And so anyway, it was a really good lesson. And you know, we've already made significant improvements to what we have to fix that, but we're going to make some other bigger changes. And the idea about the magic links was just one of those, but there was another part of it that we kind of compromised on, and it made it murkier and muddier and that whole thing. So anyway, the lesson was just figure out what your core thing. There's 1,000, let's call it, just to make it smaller. Like there's 100 decisions you have to make as you make something, and there might be 3 or 4 of them that are essential, that have to really, really, really be good, because everything's built on top of that. It's like the foundation of the idea. And if the foundation ends up getting cracks in it or it's uneven because you make some compromises, that's going to affect everything else. And so whenever you start to see the foundation cracking or being uneven or something, you've got to stop and go, is this idea good anymore? It would have been good if the foundation was right, but if the foundation is not right, is it still good? And I think it's a really valuable thing to go through. And you learn the lesson the hard way sometimes. But anyway, that was something that we went through recently. And getting back to the spirit of the show, talking about things we struggle with, I wanted to sort of bring that up. And by the way, really quick,
Yeah.
People have questions. Just so people know how to use Blab. If you have a question you want to ask us, we take questions on this. You can do a /Q over in the comments section, write your question, and it'll show up on this board on the left for us to answer those questions. So anyway, I'll throw that out there.
So for future planning, do you think you'll change how you kind of do some of the structure, or like, will you try to pitch what's essential, you think, up front differently, or does this really even need any kind of systemic change to, I guess, how you plan features in some of the development?
Around
like
this particular thing, or in general?
Yeah, I mean, just in the future, like the next time you guys do a sprint on a feature, do you think you'll call out like, hey, here are the foundational concepts that we have to make sure are right? Let's not fuck this up.
Yeah.
Or do you even have to worry about it? Is this just something you'll keep in the back of your head and will just kind of be a good reminder to kind of, get your brain thinking about it again?
Well, I mean, hopefully we internalize the lesson, hopefully. But I do think that it's a little bit more on me at some point to figure out what the planks are for an idea.
Yeah.
And then start to, like, if I start to notice some of those slipping, like, call it out. And other people should do this too. But I definitely feel like that's one of my responsibilities here is to figure out the things that must work for something to be a good idea. And if we start pulling those straws out, like going, hey, is this still a good idea?
Yeah. Is it too early? Go ahead.
What's bad is when you spend a lot of time on, like, the idea would have been great, and then you spend a lot of time, but then you compromise in a few places, you pull a few straws out, you spend a lot of time, then you spend a lot of time fixing after that, and then you scrap it. That's like the worst, is to spend all this time making something that you could have known along the way had some issues because you compromised on a couple core things. So it's really about preventing significant wasted time and frustration for everybody involved, including just bad customer experience. So I do hope we internalize that some more and we start to think about what are the things that have to work with this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll go back to non-passwordless password logins again? I mean, do you foresee going back to username and passwords? I'm just curious because it is a very novel feature. And we were even considering like doing this because we're, looking into kind of migrating away from the 37 ID.
Right.
So I was just curious. Yeah. Like, did you learn a lesson to kind of keep going with passwordless kind of upfront on the desktop, or do you want to get away from it?
I think we're going to move away from it. I think we're going to go back to passwords, and then look down the road at passwordless being an alternative way versus the default way. Because I believe there's a lot of value in it, but even more fundamental than that, one of the reasons we went this way was because while a lot of people like to shit on email, email is not going away anytime soon. It's the way a lot of people communicate, especially in cutting edge technology companies. And we deal with all sorts of different kinds of customers across the broad spectrum, broad spectrum. And so a lot of people love email. They want to get emails. In fact, sometimes they get upset when they don't get emails because we've cut way back on the emails that we send in Basecamp, and they're like, they want to get emails because that's how they just find out about things, because they're not active users of something. They don't want to have to go in and check a badge inside some app. They just don't want to do that, and I totally understand that, completely understand that. So part of the thing with the passwordless was that everybody was an email user by default, and that you didn't have to create an account. So you would get an invite. Or when you were added to a Basecamp, we didn't actually send anybody an invitation. You only got an invitation when you were notified about something. Long story short, I'm mixing up a bunch of things here, but we went back on that idea. So we started sending invitations to everybody by default. And then we lost the notion of somebody who didn't have to be bothered by Basecamp unless they were specifically notified about something. So anyway, what we're going to do is clarify that there's flat out two different kinds of people. This is getting back to the Atom diagram I was just explaining. When you're working with a group of people, there is a core group who is bought in to something. They're into it. Might be 3, might be 1, might be 5, might be 8. Who knows, right? But then there are people on the periphery that need to be kept in the loop on some stuff sometimes. They want to get the big announcements. They want to get the heartbeats. They want to get a couple key things once in a while to give them a sense of how things are going. They want to get a report here and there. They do not need to be bothered about even what this product is. They don't want to learn it. They don't care about it because it doesn't have anything to do with them anyway. I totally understand these things. And so we're going to make it very clear that there's at least two distinct kinds of people who use Basecamp. There are people who are all in, and there are people who are looped in. And all in people will set up a username and password. Looped in people won't have to do anything. They won't get invites. They won't even know this product exists because they don't have to. They'll only just get things via email when they're specifically sent to those people. And then if they will ever want to level up, perhaps they'd be able to level up to an all-in person if they wanted to. But just being distinct and clear about it, this is how people think. They're like, I know I've got these 3 people and these 2 people I'll never get on this thing ever. They're never going to use it. And so let's just acknowledge that that's true and make it very clear that that you can do something for those people versus almost every single technical product assumes everyone's going to buy into it. Assumes everybody is on board, that onboarding is the way to do it. I'm thinking onboarding is not the way to do it for people who don't want to be onboarded. So we're going down that path, which is a very distinct and unique path in this industry, and I'm a full-blown believer in it. And Basecamp has always done this really well. It's never just been explicit. So we're going to be even more explicit about it. So people, when they set up a Basecamp, when they add the people to it, they'll go, oh yeah, I know I will never get Bill. And Janice will never, Janice doesn't want this thing, and Fred's just not interested. But Fred, Janice, and Bill need to know some things occasionally. So I'll put them over here in this bucket or whatever, and they'll get stuff when I need to. So they'll be informed when they need to be, but everyone else will be full-blown in because they're on board with it. So
yeah,
being explicit, I think, is the key thing. And one of the really interesting insights that Ryan Singer here had recently is that in our industry, everyone wants to say everything's easy. Like, it's really easy to get set up. It's really easy to get going. It's really, and the truth is, it's just flat out not easy because you've got people, and human beings are not easy. Everyone has different demands. Everyone has different time. Everyone has different interests, and everyone has, people are complicated. And just to be honest about that and go, it is sort of a challenge to get 7 people on board with anything. No matter what it is, it's a challenge. Unless you have the power to force things down people's throats, it's a challenge. So let's just be honest about that, and let's build a tool or build tooling around that real world, the reality of what it's like to actually work with people, especially when you're working with volunteers, especially when you're working across departments, especially if you're working across vendors, especially if you're working with clients. These are people with different interests and different motivations and all sorts of things. And just being honest about it, go, it's not that easy, actually. So let's slow it down, make some decisions along the way, put people in the right places so you know and feel comfortable with that what you're doing is going to make sense for their world and for them. And just kind of do that. I'm very bullish on this. I think it's a really good bet for us to be making. We actually know that this is absolutely true. It's just a matter of we've never been explicit about it. So I want to get more explicit about it in the setup process.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up this topic though. Like we stress a lot about this too. Like I feel like we have a very common user though that's like it's still in one of your 2 users, but it's like the core user who should be using it but doesn't want to, and it's like it's one of those things where it's just like there's usually a manager or someone who wants to be kind of they want to be in the loop about what everybody's activities are with people with these contacts, right? Like they'll try and get their company, they'll try and get their group on Highrise, and they want to know who all their employees are talking to, especially if an employee leaves or goes on vacation. They want to make sure like they have that record of what was going on in those conversations. But folks have a really they I don't know, sometimes it's laziness, sometimes it's just they don't, it's easier, it's more seamless to just kind of reply to an email, and they forget about keeping the conversation in Highrise. There's an effort that we have to make to somehow get some of these people like attached and onboarded and adopting Highrise who don't want to, who there's some friction, but they really do need to become a core user. And it's tough. I haven't really solved this either.
Core user. Like what?
Say it again.
Why do they need to be a core user?
Well, it's like, for example, like if I want to know that an employee has some outstanding conversations and then they're not here anymore, how am I going to find out about what was going on?
Right.
It's I have to almost mandate that they like keep the conversations in Highrise, which sucks. Like I don't want to have to be issuing rules like this.
Right.
But then the alternatives are kind of weird, which is like, well, I could set up auto forwarding rules like automatically in your account. I could go to your Gmail settings as an admin of your Gmail account and set up some, I could try to make that more seamless, but that seems kind of like shady. That's kind of like a weird admin exercise of like, well, I'm trying to give myself a window to your email and your conversations just because, but that's not something I want to do. That type of thing.
Yeah.
There's often a bunch of, I even remember like working with a partner using Highrise to do, say, customer development. And it was just like, there were things in his, going on in his email and address book, and none of it was just like, none of it was necessarily bad. It just, he wasn't adopting Highrise at the time. But then when I needed to make sure, hey, did you contact this person? The info isn't in Highrise, and I got to go bug them. And it's just, it's interesting. Like there's users of Highrise that somehow need to kind of like more strongly encourage their group to adopt keeping their stuff in Highrise. And it's probably just on us not doing a good enough job, like communicating that value proposition to people who've been invited to this thing.
I've been thinking a lot about that, and not about Highrise specifically, but just this idea in general of value or communicating value or whatever.
Yeah.
I got to say that I think that everyone's doing this, not everybody. That's a too broad a statement, but we're thinking about this sometimes the wrong way. It should be like, what's in it for me? That's what you need to communicate. What's in it for me versus what's the value of the product? Like if somebody is trying to like, why should someone use Highrise? It's not about Highrise can let you do this. It should be like, what is it that you need to do? Like why should Highrise be part of your workflow is really I think more the question versus like helping educate people as to like how Highrise works. You know what I mean? So maybe that's what you meant, but like, I think sometimes it's about like, and we did this in the past with Basecamp. It's like when people got invited, they'd get this video and it'd be like, here's how Basecamp works. Well, how Basecamp works doesn't matter if I don't know what's in it for me to begin with. Like, why in the hell should I be using this thing anyway? What's in it for me? So I think about it from that angle. Like, what's in it for somebody else? Why should they be part of this? Why should they use this? Why should they adopt this? Is more the angle versus here's how it works.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you were already aiming for. But I think there's just a tendency to be like, let's send them more education about how it works.
My goal isn't more about like how it works. It's to lure, it's to show some sort of excitement of why you'd want to use this. Why is it exciting for you? But I feel like in Highrise's world, like it's more exciting, and it's more there's like here's what you get out of it. If you're like a manager, like I feel like there's a lot of managers who want to use Highrise with the people they manage, and it's the people they manage who are like, what do I get out of it? I don't get much out of it. Like I just have to record the stuff that I'm doing, and it's the manager who's the one who gets use out of it. It's the manager who can be like, well, now I can stay on top of what everybody's doing. I can see how many tasks you're getting done. I can see stuff. I can do reporting on like what you're doing as one of the people I manage. But it's the people that are being managed that I feel like I'm having a hard time getting, encouraged to use it more.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a tough one.
It is. I mean, it's tough. That's kind of my point. It's like, this actually is complicated, because human beings are involved, and because everyone has different motivations and everyone has different things going on in their day, and products aren't typically pitched in terms of what's in it for each individual person. It's that kind of stuff. So anyway, it is complicated and challenging. But
I like this angle that you're going at. Like now I'm already brainstorming on some stuff that we could do. Like, I don't know, I can already see a much better type of experience, like being invited, like, hey, here's some stuff that now you're going to be faster at. Here's some stuff that like, you're less likely to make a mistake because Highrise has got your back with like, you're probably not going to, accidentally email someone by accident now because you're using Highrise to send email or do group inbox. It's interesting. That's a good angle. Yeah. But anyway, this was a good talk. It's already seeding some ideas.
Good. Let me jump in and we'll take a question since I asked people to ask questions.
Yep.
Let's ask Jason here. Whoops. Okay, there it is. Jason, how much time do you spend looking at competition for ideas? I tend not to like to look at the competition for ideas. I'm like to be aware of what they're doing, but I think building their ideas into your product ultimately is not going to, like, what's the point, basically? Might as well use the competitor's product. Like if we're just going to try and make what they're making, and that's not to say that wasn't your point, but I think when you look too much to your competitors' products, you end up feeling like you need to chase them in some way, or like we need to be more like them in some way. And it's just a natural thing because everyone's got good ideas in their products. And it's good to know what they are, but I prefer to look just outside my industry for ideas. I think there's a lot of groupthink in our industry, and there's a lot of narrow tunnel vision going on in our industry, and everyone's kind of trying to make a lot of the same things and solve the same problems the same ways. So I like to just look outside my industry for inspiration and ideas and whatever it might be. It might be customer service. It might be copywriting. It might be messaging. It might be just a certain user experience that I think is fantastic. It might be a different way of handling a problem. I don't know. I don't go seeking those things out. I just kind of try to pay attention, and then things end up influencing me. But I have seen over the years, as I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs about this, people will just study their competition like endlessly, and then I'll look at their product and they end up just trying to build their competitors' products. And there's no reason for you to exist then, because they already have a leg up on you if you're following them. If they already have the idea first, like you kind of have a leg up on them, or they have a leg up on you. Second, like you're not differentiating yourself necessarily if you're just trying to fill in the gaps with what they're doing in your product. So I just think I think there's other places to look for inspiration, but I do think it's good to be aware of what's going on and why customers might be choosing a competitor is valuable, obviously, but I wouldn't look to them for ideas, put you that way. That's how I'd answer that. I don't know what your thoughts are, Nathan.
I think there's an interesting, I've been reading, I don't think I've brought this anecdote up before, but I'm reading this biography of Richard Feynman, the famous physicist. He's got an interesting thing that I was reading about him defending, I think is like his doctoral thesis. So he goes to defend his doctoral thesis, does this interview. They ask him what the colors of the rainbow are. He doesn't know them. He doesn't know them because he refuses to take other people's assumptions and not know like where things come from first principles. So instead of knowing the colors of the rainbow, which a lot of people know because it's Roy G. Biv, right? Everyone's got that stupid acronym or whatever it's called in their head because that's most of us like look at things and we just kind of memorize something we've been told or we see like, of course, the colors of the rainbow. Someone told me they're Roy G. Biv. And if I see a rainbow, I can make out some of those colors. Yeah, there's red, orange, yellow. Richard Feynman is like, fuck it. I don't know the colors of the rainbow. When he was asked what the colors of the rainbow are, he calculated them from knowing how light refracts on water. What was interesting in it, he almost got it wrong because he screwed up the calculation. He reversed the refraction index, and he realized his mistake. But it was like a really powerful moment where you realize like this guy goes back to the first principles to understand what it is he's trying to solve. And when you look at your competition, the competition is like, there's no first principles there. It's like they've already made a bunch of assumptions, and you don't know why those are there. Like you don't know what problem they're trying to solve. What type of customer they're trying to help. When you look at competition like that, it's like you're not making any of your own first principle decisions. Elon Musk is another guy who, like, I think he's so successful because he goes back to the first principles, like how can we succeed throwing away everybody else's kind of ideas and assumptions. And when you look at competition and you look at all that stuff they've assumed, I don't know. Yeah, you do yourself a huge disservice. So that's some stuff I think about.
I've seen like over the years, we've been copied more than most companies.
Oh yeah.
Like there's At one time there was I kept a log of there's like 24 or 25 different products that clearly were using our design ideas and whatever. And the thing is that the problem with copying, and this is not really the question necessarily, but people, when you look to competition for inspiration, people tend to sometimes copy it back in. Problem with copying is exactly what Nathan was saying, which is that you don't know the thinking that went behind it. So you end up seeing the surface and you see the decisions they made, or actually you don't see the decisions they made. You see the outcome of whatever they went through, but you don't know how they got there. And even more important, like I think this is really good insight you just had, is that you don't know what customer they're going for necessarily. You don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And if you just copy the surface and you don't know what's behind it, then where do you go next? Where do you go from there? And you don't know where to go because you haven't gone through the process to figure out how to get there in the first place. So then you're just constantly in this mode of looking around for what to do from other people. And I just feel like there's a lack of depth there. Anyway, that's, I think you can also always tell a copy. You can just always spot a copy because there's a bunch of subtleties that don't line up properly. And some companies do well that way. There's lots of companies who do well copying other companies. And I think at the end of the day, you still have to decide what kind of company you want to be. That's not the company I want to be. If someone else wants to be that way, of course, that's fine. There's plenty of ways to be successful, and there's lots of copies in the market and the whole thing. It doesn't get me excited to wake up in the morning, basically.
Yep.
Cool. I said we'd get to some questions. We have like maybe 5 minutes to go here.
Sure.
A little bit long. Zane has 3 lined up. Let's see what his first one. I'm trying to go. I don't know if it's organized from bottom to top. I'll talk about this first one, top one, about Slack, since it's sort of related to what we're talking about here. So people, Zane's curious about success Slack's having with work communication. We launched Campfire 5 years, actually 7 years before Slack. Why do you think Campfire didn't get as much adoption? I mean, there's a variety of reasons why Campfire didn't hit like Slack hit in the realm of chat, basically chat rooms. I know that's not quite what the products are, but let's just boil them down to that just for a moment. I think one of the things is timing. So Campfire was 7 years ahead of its time, probably. People weren't used to communicating this way. They just didn't know how to do it. They didn't know why they should do it. And that could have been our fault. So I'm not going to blame it all on timing, but like that timing plays a part in everything. So whatever success people have, there's timings involved. Sometimes you can make the timing, other times it just happens at the right time. You don't really know, but I think timing has a big part of it. I also think they first of all, the product's very good. And I also think they did a really nice job with the onboarding experience. I think it's quite good and very innovative. So I think they did the right thing early also by sort of spending time seeding the product amongst influencers and working with them in the early days to make sure the product worked really well for those influencers who had a lot of power to suggest the product, and people follow those people basically. So I think they did some really, first of all, product's very good, and they did some really nice tactical things, and then they had a really fresh dose of timing. It's just sort of the timing was right. So I think for that type of product, I think they nailed those things. I happen to think that chat is a very small slice of actually what it takes to do work with groups. And I actually think that it's, for the most part, a bad way to work with groups on a lot of things. But that's, I don't think that chat is a bad idea. I think it's a piece of the pie, which is why you see people using a variety of different tools along with chat. They'll use this for chat, and they'll use that for tasks, and they'll use this for docs, and they'll use a bunch of other things for different things. People are DIY piecing solutions together. But anyway, it's a very good product, and they did a really, really nice job, and timing was right, and great people behind it, and it's very clear that their success is well deserved. That's how I'd put that. Hopefully that answers some of the questions. You want to take anything else, or do you think we're pretty good?
Yeah, I mean, we're fine. I mean, Zane talks about metrics. I mean, we could talk all day about metrics. I don't know. I mean, the most important one, I'm just looking to see if customers are growing. I don't spend a lot of time on everything. I mean, I've got like right now, I've got web analytics up, I've got financial stuff up on another tab. But the core metric I keep looking at is just our customers growing. Is the number of customers growing every week? I don't know. That seems to kind of really embody a lot of stuff in there. So I don't know. That's yeah. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. All right. Let's call it. I think we went a little bit long. So
Cool.
It's a good one. This is a like a meaty session.
Cool.
Questions and stuff. So
I am going to be traveling tomorrow for the holidays. So I don't even know when to pick this back up again. When's
I'm around. So whenever you're back, you just tell me.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm sure we could. Yeah, do something. Probably not until next week then, since Christmas is like this week.
Whenever, totally. Yeah, whenever you're back, I'm around. So you just let me know.
Okay, cool. Have a great holiday, everybody. Thank you for watching the show, and we will see you guys soon.
Thank you so much, all. Later.
Later, man.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah.